Today we're talking about Indonesian independence, more specifically, the War for Independence. Link to the original video is down in the description below. If you like the commentary and discussions we have here on my channel, consider subscribing. I also have a playlist to all my Indonesian videos down in the description as well. This is a video series, so I recommend you check out that playlist for all my Indonesian videos and this series as well. Without further ado, let's jump right into it.
The Indonesian War of Independence from 1945 to 1949 is an often forgotten conflict. For decades, the horrors of this bloody anti-colonial war were swept under the rug by the Dutch government, and it was only in March 2020 that they officially recognized and apologized for the terror with which they had ruled over tens of millions of Indonesians.
Dang, that's super recent. Jesus. Oh my God. What?
From the mid-19th century until 1949. But this conflict is the very beginning of post-World War II decolonization, and also one of the first places where the Western powers face off with the post-war communist surge. It sets the US and the European powers on a path of ambiguity and confusion as they start a series of wars to arguably defend democracy, but that will also see them wage bloody war on peoples simply seeking their own freedom. Welcome to the Indonesian War of Independence, a Time Ghost miniseries that follows that struggle year by year from 1945 to 1949. I'm Indy Nidell. Already before the Second World War,
I like the setup of this show. It feels very historic.
the U.S. decided to extend its opposition to colonialism from the Americas to the world at large. And when the war ends, they expect action. But they're also facing a mighty new foe as the Cold War begins, a communist bloc led by former ally Joseph Stalin and the USSR, and Mao Zedong opposing Chiang Kai-shek for rulership over China. The remaining European major colonial powers, Great Britain, France, and the Netherlands, are equally fearful of the communist surge. But they have no plans of their own to let go of their colonies. They successfully argue to the US that releasing those colonies will create a void in dominion in Asia that will surely be filled by Stalin and Mao.
Interesting. Huh. Well, I mean, so then what do you do as a US? You just say, oh, sorry, you're our allies. We're going to go free them anyway. That's crazy. That's a tough position to be in. But I'm glad that, the countries themselves actually said, you know what, we're going to fight for independence instead.
The U.S. releases its last major colony in Asia, the Philippines, just after the war, and enters into a constructive alliance with that now independent nation. But instead of leaning on the European powers to do the same, as planned, they hesitate and reluctantly agree to reinstate the status quo of 1939. At the same time, the U.S., represented by President Harry Truman and former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, is also spearheading the transformation of the wartime anti-Axis alliance of the United Nations into a global body to create peace and stability.
See, so this is where so a lot of American history, we get our own point of view because we want to know where we do and what we came from, right? I didn't realize that the European nations were this against it. I kind of thought we were all on the same page. I mean, I would assume we would be, essentially, especially if we're all on the same page of fighting a common enemy. But that's just crazy that the U.S. was actually we were actually decolonizing our territories, but the United Nations, I guess, or what now is the United Nations, a lot of these European countries are just like, nope, we're not going to do that. That's crazy. And it's crazier now that I know this. It feels like, and Europe's the one that always judges us when they're the ones not wanting to do it. That's crazy. That's so wild. This is really funny. I think it's funny because Europeans love shitting on Americans, but when we look at this situation, wow, they were the ones not wanting to give up the colonies. That's insane. And you could even argue Europeans had these colonies longer than a lot of other countries. So crazy.
At the center of that effort is the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, granting all peoples the right to freedom, democracy, and self-determination. This is a position that is almost impossible to reconcile. One hand is maintaining Western domination, while the other is trying to give the world freedom and equal rights. And the people of the world want that badly enough that many are willing to go to war for it. I mean, isn't that what the global conflagration that just ended was about? A war to end tyranny, exploitation, chauvinism, and racial inequality?
Yeah.
Already in the winter.
Wait, so let me get this straight. So America comes into the war, right, to essentially, let's be honest, bail Europe out, right? We come in there with our big bombs and planes, right? We go in there, not try and say we saved the day, but we went in there and changed dramatically the tide of war. To say, hey, let's just get back to everybody being a free democracy, let the people be free, to then once we leave, all of Europe's like, no, actually, we're just going to go back to what we were doing. That's crazy. That's actually kind of wild. That's wild. That's wild.
Of 1945, it looks inevitable that the former Allied giants will face off with each other and with the peoples they hold in servitude in a violent showdown about the very principles they claim to defend. These two simultaneous conflicts, one between democracy versus communism and another about self-determination versus colonial servitude, will dominate the second half of the 20th century. This will lead to the betrayal of the ideas now being forged in the United Nations. It will turn the powers of the alliance against tyranny into the enforcers of what they claim to oppose. It will lead to proxy wars and violent independent struggles that will repeatedly put the world on the brink of another world war. And the first place where all of that will come together is the Dutch East Indies.
And that's crazy. That is so crazy. That is wild. I guess I don't really know. I guess I'm just gonna say it. I'd never really understood European history on this level, especially in this region. I didn't know they were really acting like this. Because again, I'm not a historian. I'm just a guy who's going to want to travel the world. But it's insane to me. Again, I just don't want to give up this point that they were really out here acting the opposite, essentially, of what America was trying to do, of what we fought for. And then, like, I get, like, America, we obviously can't police all of Europe and the whole world forever, but at the same time, it's like, guys, we're all in the same team. Why can't we just let people, like, just let people live? Like do the thing that we fought against, like, do the thing that we fought for. Like, it's just crazy. Man, Europeans are
a colonial dominion of the Kingdom of the Netherlands that now want to become the independent nation of Indonesia.
Yes.
It will be a bloody 4-year conflict fought by both sides with methods that can only be described as vicious, criminal, and contrary to human dignity and life. It is that conflict that we will cover in this series. But before we go there, we have to understand how and why this populous group of islands came under the control of the Dutch in the first place. Well, the why is actually pretty simple. Money.
Obviously.
The region is 50 times the size of the Netherlands, and it's a cash cow, providing natural resources, cheap labor, and opportunity for enterprise without caring about the legal and social restraints of the homelands.
And also the trade routes. The trade routes were probably one of the biggest things. You guys control, and not only control, but you are the pathway to a lot of other countries from either side. So you're essentially the border for the markets in that region. So it's huge.
And for that to be maintained, they need to keep the people subjugated and underdeveloped in what historians have described as a state of violence. For the how, we have to go all the way back to the 1500s, to the age of exploration. First, it is the European naval powerhouses, led by the kings of Spain and Portugal, that roam the seas, and the Ottoman Empire by land to expand their opportunities for resources and trade, most often through violent subjugation. After Queen Elizabeth defeats the Spanish Armada in 1588, the British and French crowns join this great game of global chess to set up trade networks and engage in the extremely lucrative European trade of spice, gold, silver, drugs, slaves, and more from faraway lands.
And that is putting it lightly. That is putting it lightly. There was so many things, even silver, for example. He says gold. So many different resources were being traded back then because there was just so much new. There was so much discovered. So Well, knew not as in like it never existed, but as in like these countries never had it. So
In 1579, a coalition of, let's call them Dutch, states from the Low Countries in what is now Belgium and the Netherlands formed the Seven Republics of the Netherlands to secede from the dominion of the Spanish crown during the 80 Years' War. No longer in the alliance of Spanish trade, they now take their own ships to the seas in pursuit of spices. See, spice trade is dominated by Portugal at this time, and when Portugal joins Spain in an Iberian Union, the Dutch access to that spice trade is shut off. So the Dutch hoist sails and establish their own trade routes. In 1602, modeled...
which, in case for those wondering, I mean, spices, remember, you gotta, if you want spices, you have to, you're not just going for like a little thing of like spice, right? Like you're trying to get enough spices for an entire country. So it's a lot of product to move, and also it's very expensive to move, but also it's going to be worth a lot because it takes so long to get there. So, you know, I think this is one of the things that I think a lot of just Americans in general, or just people like me that are just average people, when we really start learning about spices, we need to understand it in scale and not just what it is, right? It's like gold is easy to understand because it's gold. But spices, it's like, no, you're moving like giant amounts because you have a whole population you got to feed or that you're going to use it for.
On the British idea of financing and promoting trade and discovery through cartels, the Dutch government supports the creation of the Dutch East India Trading Company, VOC,
which we do know about. I've learned a little bit about these guys.
By a conglomerate of wealthy businessmen. It is granted a 21-year tax-free monopoly on Dutch overseas trade and the rights to establish settlements, sign treaties, and raise armies and fleets to wage war. The VOC soon establishes trading posts in Africa and Southeast Asia, often forcing out the British or Portuguese and brutally subduing local rulers. This develops into an economic, political, and military juggernaut, practically independent from the Seven Republics.
And which I can see why they're aggressive, because they're trying to compete directly with two very powerful powers. I get that. But again, I'm not a fan of this whole, like, I always believe there's a balance of the two. If you want to work with somebody, you should always try to strike a balance. And I think we kind of see that a little bit when we were learning about the kingdom of Majapahit, right? We see these smaller kingdoms learning to value trade and find middle grounds, but also still being independent, right? So, I just don't like how this colonization. I've never been a fan of colonization, like many people. Like, I mean, it's not a crazy take to have, but it's disheartening seeing how violent some of these colonizers were.
One of the areas of Dutch trade is a gigantic archipelago of over 17,000 islands between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, what the Europeans call the East Indies. This archipelago is dominated by 5 large islands: Sumatra, Java, Borneo, Sulawesi, and New Guinea. Although Western Europeans discover the East Indies in 1512, it has been continuously populated since prehistoric times. The archipelago is inhabited by a large, diverse population speaking hundreds of different languages, living in countless tribes, sultanates, and kingdoms. Situated at the maritime crossroads between India and China, it has long been a strategic trading and military position.
And that's not even just that. You guys have such a, which again, we need to find a video on the wildlife. You have such diverse wildlife for that many islands. You have so much culture, so much language, so much just everything. There you have literally, you touch a little bit of the whole world in that little region. It's actually kind of insane. It's actually cool. It's really cool.
Paid for by Indian, Chinese, and Southeast Asian interests. As a result, the islands are not only ethnically diverse, but also a patchwork of religions with major Hindu, Buddhist, and Muslim populations. While it is unclear exactly how Islam comes to the islands, it is believed to have arrived with Arab tradesmen sometime after the 9th century. By the 16th century, it has become a major religion on the islands of Sumatra, Java, and the Malay Peninsula. During the coming centuries, it will gradually become the dominant religion across the entire archipelago.
And become the largest Muslim nation in the world, which is kind of crazy that a lot of the Western. Oh, okay, I'm going to say this. A lot of the Western world doesn't know that still. But again, like kind of as somebody who's been starting to cover this region and talk about it and really learn a lot about it, a lot of the West doesn't even talk about Southeast Asia. And it still disappoints me. I wish we'd do a better job, but I guess this is where I step in and try to do my part. But still, like it's incredible that the world just doesn't really know that, or they do, but they don't recognize that. They always just see what's going on in the Middle East and think that's what a Muslim country is. It's like, no, that's not even the largest one. They're vastly different, and um, vastly different styles, different culture, different people. And I think America, especially, should do a better job at recognizing Indonesia and just Southeast Asia in general.
Already in 1564, the Achenese Sultan, controlling a large part of northern Sumatra, gets military support through 22 warships sent by the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent to fight back the Portuguese Empire, who were trying to corner the lucrative trade of nutmeg, cloves, and cubeb pepper by
nutmeg. It's always going to come up.
Military might. The Ottomans are successful, and Aceh is established as an independent Ottoman protectorate. With the Portuguese weakened, in the early 1600s, the Dutch, Spanish, French, and British begin establishing shared trade dominion over the region. What starts as trading ports and forts built to extend military influence develops into annexation and full appropriation of overseas territories. Lands, people, and resources are all taken for the benefit of the colonizer. If local leaders refuse to sign what are very unfavorable treaties, or if they resist, they are met with brute force. This only worsens as colonies are incorporated into European empires. See, the first wave of corporate colonialism that lasts well into the 18th century is followed by imperialist conquest with the establishment of colonies proper. The crown of the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, established in 1815, wants a slice of that pie as well. But the harsh competition for the lucrative trade in the East Indies has left the archipelago without a clear rule by any one of the European powers.
And I think that's why it got so violent so fast. Again, never as an excuse. I think they should have never done this. But this, from their point of view, I think this is why it got so violent so fast. Because when something's up for grabs, everyone wants a part of it. And it's just disheartening that it literally feels like every European power really just went over there and said, you know what, let's just all take turns and do horrible things. That's crazy.
The Netherlands are in large parts of Java and a number of trading ports, plantations, and some cities on the bigger islands, but they also have colonies in India and Africa, where Great Britain now wants to expand its empire. In 1824, the British and the Dutch enter into a treaty to divide between them dominion over South Asia and the East Indies. It is the beginning of a situation that will give Britain strong positions on the mainland, including India, Singapore, and Malaya. The Dutch will have the islands, and throughout the 19th century, they expand their territories in a series of bloody campaigns, drawing the borders of what is now Indonesia. The 1871 Anglo-Dutch Treaty of Sumatra gives the Dutch control of the entire maritime area, when the British yield their last positions on Java in exchange for the Dutch Gold Coast in Africa. Now, remember the Aceh Sultanate, the Ottoman Protectorate? With its lucrative pepper trade and oil resources, the Dutch soon get competition from American interests for influence over the Sultan of Aceh. When the Sultan starts expanding his interests in northern Sumatra southward, the Dutch decide to settle the issue with force in a series of campaigns that will be known as the Aceh War. From 1876 to 1904.
Wait, so the America was trying to help the local powers? Well, I guess at this time, America really hates a lot of Europe, I believe. I'm pretty sure. So So we're always helping the opposition, I think. I'm pretty sure at this time.
The Dutch expansion takes on its most gruesome form.
Wow.
The Dutch army, under command of Johannes van Hoots, will now turn the Dutch East Indies into that state of violence. Led by Special Corps, the Corps Maréchaussée, things like torture, plundering, and collective punishment by mass murder for guerrilla resistance become common practice. To suppress even thoughts of further resistance, the Dutch expand this strategy of shock and awe to the entire Dutch East Indies. They will rely on fear to keep the Indonesians pacified.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. The Dutch were horrible. Oh my goodness. I didn't know this.
They justify this because of the cruel indigenous war practices and the uncivilized nature of the actions of Indonesian auxiliary troops in their own armies, which consist mainly of indigenous soldiers led by European officers. These expeditions to complete the Dutch East Indies kill around 120,000 Indonesians. But out of this terror, the Dutch East Indies, with borders roughly the same as modern Indonesia, are born. Now, though there is resistance to Dutch colonial rule on a regional or local level, there is no unified national ideal of Indonesian independence behind it at this point.
And that typically is what keeps independence, like that's what makes independence hard, because if you don't have a shared vision, then no one will ever fight for the same cause. So then who do they have allies with? Who could it? I mean, obviously this is a series, but now it's making me wonder if who really was trying to help them. I mean, clearly it seemed like the US tried, didn't really work. Didn't work at all. If anything, it just made Europeans even more mad. So you guys were really all alone in this. And I think it kind of goes back to the bigger question, even when we're seeing today. It's like, even if Indonesia wanted help, everyone somebody who they would want help from is so far away, you know? Um, Dang, this must be rough. This is tragic, but um I'm glad that it will lead to like a there will be a good ending essentially to independence, you know. But I didn't realize how hard it was to try to get independence, because if you look at a lot of these other countries that did get independence, they had allies. People were fighting for them or even with them. Like America had a lot of people help them get independence. Mexico had a lot of people help them get independence. But it seems like you guys are just straight up maybe one person at most. Just but outside of that, just straight up having to do it on your own. It seemed like, but maybe we'll see more people come into play. But that that's rough.
But as the Dutch East Indies become one, nationalist movements start to spring up in Java and other places where Dutch influence is most noticeable. Following the First World War, ideas of decolonization grow in popularity worldwide. And Indonesians living and studying in the Netherlands start calling for the independence of their own nation. New youth organizations are founded across Indonesia in the 1920s and begin to imagine and to cultivate a united Indonesian identity, building a shared national character. They promote Javan and Indonesian culture, quickly forging the idea of a politically independent Indonesia, Indonesia Merdeka. This is cemented in a unified organization in 1926 with the first Indonesian Youth Congress. A flag, an anthem, and the language Bahasa are agreed on, as well as a unifying foundation of common desire, history, language, customary law, education, and the Scout movement. It is a generation under the age of 30 who are giving birth to the concept of an Indonesian nation state. Perhaps ironically to the Dutch colonizers, they are a minority of youth that have gained access to Western education introduced by the Dutch in one of their rare attempts at positive reinforcement of colonial dominion.
We kind of see this around the world, but I think what's important here, I mean, we could, yes, I can say the irony, but I want to say that it's just a little bit different, right? because if you see kind of the reforms or like the change that comes from a lot of around the world, it's actually oftentimes led by older folks, right? But here we're seeing a different approach. We're seeing young people get involved, which nowadays, what a lot of the change that coming in this region is from young people. So I just want to say this is kind of it's cool to see consistently. Back then, young people were the ones that changed the way the country ran, or even this region. And then if you look at it today, young people are doing the same thing. Whereas like in America, it was older folks that changed things, and now it's older folks that are changing things again. So um, I want to highlight that, and I think it's really important, and I think it's really cool because I think it should inspire the youth um, of Indonesia to say like you have a culture of young people making change, and I think that's really awesome. Um, because to give context, like in America, well, oh, you can't change anything until you're old. It's like, can we though? You know, we just gotta look around the world and you see you can. You can make real change in your life, not just your life, but the world around you, to your neighbors, and do real good, regardless of what's happening. I think this is really cool to see.
The students enter politics and found the Secular and Nationalist Party, the PNI, in 1928 and openly call for Indonesian independence. Their leader is Sukarno, a young architect who attended advanced Dutch schools on Java. Now, he is a charismatic figure, fluent in Dutch, Indonesian, Sundanese, Balinese, Japanese, Arabic, German, French,
Wow.
and English. For real. He attracts a large following among younger Indonesians. It does not take long, though, before the Dutch government cracks down on his movement's brazen expressions of anti-colonialism. You see, along with the nationalist movement, there are other Western concepts like socialism and communism driving anti-colonial spirit. In 1926, the Dutch use a failed communist uprising as an excuse to come down on independence movements across the board.
Which I'm not a fan of communism. I think if you look at ideologies as a whole, a lot of communism has attributed to a lot of deaths, right? I think it's a very violent ideology. Well, I will say this. I've noticed that authoritarian style beliefs use that also as an example of like they see that extreme and then they label things that aren't that so that they can be extreme. Does that make sense? Because they know that ideology is extreme, but then they'll take any excuse to label anything that way just to squash it. It's not so much common today because of the internet and age of information, but we look throughout history. It's like colonizers, for example. Oh, we can't have that, so we're gonna label any opposition that same thing. It's like, no, that's not true. It's very different. These two that what is being described as a nationalist movement is not a communist movement. It's very clearly not. But the fact that they use that as an excuse is not only common back then, it seems like, but it's so wild. I didn't realize that these Europeans would be one of the first ones that would be doing this when they criticize all these other countries for doing that. To me, it's insane. This whole thing it's a story of incredible feat, and being able to overcome something so great with little to no help, but also it's showing the hypocrisy of what a lot of Europe has even today. um it's insane. It's a beautiful story, really.
Sukarno and other PNI figures are arrested in 1929 and sentenced to 4 years imprisonment, and nationalist language is strictly censored. But Sukarno uses his public trial as a platform to spread the nationalist message and to unmask the Dutch as colonial oppressors, transforming himself into a national hero. In a new anti-nationalist crackdown in 1934, the Dutch move to disable the entire movement. Sukarno is silently exiled to the island of Flores, along with the majority of the anti-imperialist leadership of nationalist parties.
And people are wondering, well, why didn't the Dutch kill him? The thing is, it's like when it comes to nationalist movements, more specifically, at least I know this for sure, is if you kill the leaders of a nationalist movement, you create martyrs, and that will inevitably cause the cause to succeed, right? Whereas, like, if you look at communist movements, you can kill all the opposition all you want; it's not going to change anything. Whereas nationalists, it's built on the idea of independence, and if you look at the idea of independence, we are all independent, right? And so that's why they just exiled them. So it's crazy that they called this nationalist movement communist, right? But then they don't even treat them like it because they know that they openly know that it's not. That's crazy. But that's why I know for sure that is the case. For those watching in America, wondering a little bit of context, but the Dutch, they some vile people. They lie openly and then treat them like what they actually are. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy.
The Dutch succeed in this because the intellectual driving force behind the Indonesian national movement is fairly small. Only a total of like 1,000 individuals get actual degrees from Indonesian universities by 1940. This also means that the movement is centered around Java and the big cities and spread thinly throughout the sprawling archipelago.
So did they kill those 1,000 people, or did they just literally exile all of them because it's so small? Because if they kill any of them, then they create martyrs. But if they just exile them all, you could literally wipe out the whole movement because they're stuck on islands where they can't talk to people.
The nationalist sentiment is far from dead, though. In 1942, the Japanese invade as part of their war of expansion in the Pacific. With the Dutch suddenly out of the picture, those exiled leaders now get an unexpected chance to resume their quest for independence.
Why does this keep happening? Okay, we're not gonna, like, this is so crazy. Indonesia is one of the most interesting historical timelines I've ever seen in my life. Okay, that I've learned. It's so crazy how everything for you guys is like lined up perfectly, right? It's like something's like let's look at the Mongols, right, invading Indonesia. They come in the middle of the Civil War. They are so confused on what's going on, and you guys are like, because y'all are so cunning and smart, you're like, oh, we know they don't know what's going on, and they don't know what they're doing. So let's just take advantage of that and kick them out, right? And it worked. This is another example of that. The Japanese literally kick out the Dutch, and the Dutch are the ones that built the systems of oppression. Someone else did the work for you, and your leaders are free to move now. Crazy how this works out. This is, as horrible as the Japanese were at that time, this is kind of like, it's weird to say, like a blessing in disguise. It was almost like, you going to sit there and tell me that this was predictable, that this was going to happen? No.
Despite Japan also pursuing a racist...
They were horrible. Japanese were during that time too. The things that they did, it's just crazy that they're the opposite. Like, they're so passive. Or, I mean, I guess they're not passive now because of the aggression of China right now. But it's crazy how much of a 180 turn they did after the war.
Imperialist policy of conquest and subjugation, Indonesian national identity will further develop under Japanese rule. And once Japan has been defeated, that movement will sweep the islands like a tsunami.
And then it's like, okay, so we look at earlier. This is what's crazy. Okay, this is crazy. So America tried to help Indonesians back then because they were interested in what was going on. Didn't work. All right, whatever. We leave. I don't know. Well, maybe I need a deeper dive in understanding that, but we saw a glimpse of us. Gone. Doesn't matter now. Fast forward time. Okay. Japanese come in. America basically just America defeats Japan. And now it's like almost like a full, like, how it's crazy. Not saying that like America did this. No. What I'm saying is it's crazy how you see glimpses of interactions and then how sometimes it comes back a full circle. It may actually help, or it might actually be negative, but we don't know. But it's crazy how big the world is, but yet how connected historically sometimes we are, right? Like, America didn't do specifically this. Like, we didn't go, maybe we did go into Indonesia and kick the the Japanese out, but I know that we defeated the Japanese using, I mean, spoiler alert, nuclear weapons. But it's just insane to me that it took a violent power at the time, the Japanese, to get the Dutch to stop doing violent colonization. Isn't that crazy? When it's just crazy.
The Dutch reaction will launch a war in which the Dutch, the British, and the defeated Japanese will work together in a brutal fight against the Indonesian independence fighters, who themselves will resort to a bloodthirsty campaign of violent resistance. Although largely forgotten in 2020, this conflict will be the beginning of the end of the colonial era and the first in a long series of bloody wars that will shape the second half of the 20th century. It will be a conflict that magnifies the issue of colonialism for world leaders. It will pit the Dutch against the US and the United Nations.
Wait, what the? Wait, what? Oh my God. Holy crap. Holy crap. Now I understand why Indonesians and the US have a special relationship. I get it now. This is so crazy to me. So you're telling me that the United States destroyed and defeated the Japanese in order to free the essentially to stop their expansionism and to stop their violent tirade, but also because of Port Harbor, but to essentially free people just so that our allies would go behind our backs and start fighting for the people we just freed? Holy crap, dude. That's crazy. No, that's so freaking wild. So you're telling me this whole time we were fighting communism as well as our own allies? Why isn't we need to talk about this more in American history. This would actually explain why. So Europeans are just such backstabbers. What's going on here? Which makes a lot of sense because if we look at it nowadays, I'll give you a modern day example. Russia, Ukraine. We're over here like, let's protect Ukraine. But guess who's buying Russian oil and all these things to basically funnel the war machine? Germany. Like, what's going on? It's like this. Oh my God. It's like they never stop trying to backstab people trying to be free. It's like they can't help it. It's so you're telling me half the time we're fighting our own allies. Not fighting our own allies, but our own allies are literally erasing the things that we tried to fight for. And Indonesians paid the price for that. That's crazy to me. That's crazy to me. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy to me. And again, this is as an outsider looking in. This is insane. It's upsetting, really. Because if we look at it modern day today, Indonesia is on the rise, right? And really has such great potential. I always say this. You guys have one of the biggest potentials to be the superpower over there. I think you guys, me personally, if you guys were somehow to figure out how to kind of resolve a lot of the internal issues, can become more powerful than China, just in my opinion, right? Now, obviously, you would have to have strong allies, which you do with the US, so it doesn't, but if you could figure out how to get your stuff in order, you would not feel the pressure from India and China as much, and you would be your own superpower. And I think you would be more powerful than both of those countries. It's just my opinion. But it's crazy to think that the people who set y'all up for failure were an ally of the people that were essentially defeating the enemies causing these problems. These backstabbing Dutch. That's what they were doing. They were backstabbing as well as these other countries that were still involved. Crazy. I get why you guys wanted me to watch this now. As an American, I'm upset for you guys. And I get it. It's like, and the fact that they only recognized it in 2020. Are you serious, dude? The gall and the nerve. What?
It will bring the conflict between the Western nations and the growing communist bloc to Indonesia. It will cost tens of thousands of lives and will involve intimidation, kidnapping, torture, and mass murder.
Oh, maybe, you know what? I'm going to say this. Maybe, hey, anybody in Southeast Asia needs help from America. I think we should just give it. Screw Europe at this point. Hey, Europeans clearly seem to like this backstab any effort towards freedom and real democracy. And it seems like the only people, the Southeast Asian region, more specifically Indonesia, has been fighting for it, and yet they can't get help because they're fighting the people that are supposed to be your friends. That's crazy. That is so crazy. That is so insane to me. That is so insane. This is wow. I know this is going to be an incredible video series. I can tell. The twists and turns. The twists and turns. So many twists and turns. The more I learned about Indonesia, so many twists and turns. So many. And I think that, again, but on the bright side, to kind of wrap this up on a positive note, it is still really cool to see and encouraging to see how you guys have a history of the youth making change, whereas a lot of countries and their history don't have that. A lot of it's been older folks, but it should feel you as Indonesians should definitely feel inspired that your youth have so much history, and I kind of like that, and I feel inspired too, even though I'm not young anymore. I guess I'm 30. I guess I don't know if you want to count that young, but still, great video series. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you think I'm a little bit? Do you think I'm too surprised? I should have known better, or am I too disappointed in Europeans, more specifically the Dutch? Let me know what you think in the comments. I love you guys. Check it out on the next one. Bye-bye. This video is brought to you, actually, by viewers like you. Thank you so much for subscribing and being part of my journey and allowing me to be a part of yours. Let's create new memories this 2025 on our road to 1 million subscribers. And with all that jazz out of the way, I just want to say thank you so much. I love y'all and enjoy the video.